Hi guys, so today we're going to be looking at Herodotus and history, and what I mean by that is really what we're going to be looking at is Herodotus's version of history, because his version of history was very important for informing our version of history as modern ancient scholars. So just as a quick context towards Herodotus, so he is traditionally dated to about 484 to 425. However, there is a lot of scholarly debate about when he was writing. Why is that an issue? Yes, yeah. Essentially, if we don't know when he's writing, we don't know if he's writing retroactively or if he's writing on, or if he's seen events and is writing about them as he is, as he's seeing them unfold, or if it's a mixture of the two. We don't know. We don't know. But for the most part, most scholars, the argument seems to be that it is the years between the Persian and the First Peloponnesian War, but it's most likely going to be closer to the latter. Okay, and that is interesting because it gives Herodotus a retroactive idea. So when we're looking at his work, if we give it a bit more of a retroactive lens, it becomes a little bit more interesting. So he is a native of Halicarnassus, which is an Ionian polis, but appears to have spent a lot of time. He did spend a lot of time in Athens, where he wrote the most of this work, and emigrated to Thrace in Italy. Why is it important that he's perhaps from Halicarnassus? Anyone knows? So Halicarnassus is an Ionian polis, which was the first polis to be conquered by the Persians, and he also spent a lot of time in Athens. Athens being the main antagonist, like one of the main antagonists of the Persians, particularly with their victory at Marathon. So, with his sort of retroactive sort of look, and also being from an Ionian polis and possibly spending time in Athens, we might be encouraged to suggest he's biased towards an Athenian understanding or a Ionian Athenian understanding of the Persian wars. So why he's really important, mainly for Herodotus, is that he is the first prose writer and historian to survive in More Than Fragments, specifically talking about history. And it is his work. He did one work, and his inquiries are the is basically a detailed examination of the Persian wars from its mythological beginnings to its very real conclusions, which is interesting in its sense because Herodotus's history already is being set out as something that isn't entirely factual. It's got a mythical element to it. Okay, and so he's also a controversial figure in ancient scholarly debate, as Plutarch wrote a polemic, which is sort of a work specifically against another work, against his Persian inquiries, entitled On the Malice of Herodotus, which he essentially accuses him of poor historical practice and ignoring some evidence in favour of others. So, what does this context sort of give us as an idea of Herodotus? Is he believable or unbelievable as a source? Yeah, it's a difficult one. It's a mixture of the two, isn't it? But from what we see of the context, we can certainly have laid down his sort of biases or his motivations going into writing the work. It doesn't necessarily mean anything he writes isn't good. It definitely is. But yes, we have to be aware that he may not be contemporary to the events he's writing about. He's possibly got a personal motivation, being from an Ionian polis and also spending time in Athens. And he's talking about mythological things. And he's also a controversial figure in ancient scholarship. So there's things to be aware of when we're talking about Herodotus. So going forward, then, what's really going to help us sort of see what Herodotus's history is, we need to consider these questions. Okay, so I want you to tell me sort of where is Herodotus getting his evidence in these passages, and what might Herodotus's version of history suggest to us about the relationship between myth, legend, and history to Herodotus, and how does his historical approach compare to our modern historical approach? Would it pass the test, the litmus test of today? So let's take a look at Herodotus 1.2. So where is Herodotus getting the information from in this passage? Yes, it's right there straight away, isn't it? They say the Persians, Legusai Persai, and it's specifically tells us here too, helpfully, not the Greek. This is not the Greek version of how Io came to Egypt. This is the Persian version of how Io came to Egypt. Uh, After this, they say he's constantly referring back to his source, and he's constantly referring back to his source here. So, but what is he writing about? So what's he talking about here? As we've just said, yeah, the Io coming to Egypt, which this is a mythological event, and how is he discussing it? Yeah, he's discussing it like it's almost like it's a contemporary sort of event. Like these are quite specific insights he's getting from the Persians, as he just calls them, and also himself. Like he's adding some of himself in here, I suppose. You know, he's thinking, and into some of his own historical inquiry and stuff. So this is quite high detail for such a mythological event. Um, so what Herodotus is this more like proper history to us? Is it are we seeing history here? Hmm. It would be what yeah saying no would be a good idea to say because the Persians he's clearly like you say he's getting this from one source and he's telling us it's the Persians. It's about a mythological event and he's adding some of his own ideas in there with I supposes and a few after this say they. So he's telling us it's someone else's information. It's quite detailed, but yeah, for us as historians of modern, it's not really enough for us, is it? That someone says this and someone says that for us to build a case, as Herodotus sort of appeals here. So if we move on to 5.59.1, where's Herodotus getting his evidence from here? Yes, he's getting it from the temple of Isthmian Apollo at Thebes of Boeotia. So the information he's getting is literally from something he has seen, something in the Isthmian Apollo at Thebes Boeotia, which is engraved on certain tripods, looking like Ionian letters. He's seen this writing. He's seen this writing on something, and he says right here, I have seen myself. Why is this important? Yes, yeah, it is important. He's actually seen this evidence himself. He's telling people that he's this isn't no longer the Persians say this or I suppose this or the Persians may say that. This is I have seen myself the Cadmean writing in the temple of Ismene Apollo. And how does he sort of like create this sort of believability in him? Yeah, he gives us an inscription here, which if he got that wrong, what could people do? They could go and check. They could definitely go and check. They could go and check to see if Herodotus is wrong. So the fact he is telling us, he's not just enough to tell it to say that he saw Cadmean writing in the temple of Ismene Apollo at Thebes. No, he's like, I can go you one further. I can give you an inscription from what I have seen. So this is my evidence is good. I've actually done history. I've done a lot of research for this. I think it's a very based on this. How would we sort of consider Herodotus in like a modern historical lens after this piece of evidence? Yes, we can definitely say about what he's talking about here is probably a lot more believable and a lot more we can take a lot more from this, okay, than we can probably the first one. So very quickly, where's he getting the evidence from here? Yes, the Spartans. The Spartans are the one giving him this information, and who else? It's an oracle at Delphi. Yep. So here again, we see Herodotus flipping back to sort of they said and he said. So What does that suggest, Herodotus? Yes, he kind of has two different sides of understanding history. He has a varied method of gaining information, essentially, and this is not all too dissimilar from what we do as ancient historians, is it? Because he is not only going to see certain things, but he's speaking to people where he can't access things that are concrete. And also, as we can tell, he's asking a variety of people. So, because he's asking a variety of people, he's getting a variety of information back, and he's sifting through this. Herodotus is sifting through this. However, what else is in this? What else is in this passage? Yes, this is a hexameter divination from the oracle at Delphi. What is this? Yeah, it's not. It's word. It's a word for word about a word for word recount of what the oracle at Delphi said. Obviously, we have no way of quantifying this, and quite likely, yes, should be skeptical about the words which Herodotus is using, and how he's using this in his narrative. So again, we have these parts of. So what I'm really trying to get in here in sort of conclusion is how Herodotus sort of mixes between these types of evidence gathering. So where is Herodotus? So to answer these questions of where is Herodotus getting his evidence, the answer is an array, isn't it? He's using concrete sources. He's using stories, local stories, and he's using Persian accounts, and he's using Greek accounts, and yeah, so he's using a variety of evidence. His sort of relationship with history, relationship between myth, legend, and history, is for Herodotus is quite mixed. It's almost like for Herodotus, myth links into history. We have to start at myth to get to history, but how he uses myth, legend, and history, and religion, for that matter, is as a historical sort of source in a way. So we have to always be aware of that. That for Herodotus, his version of history does differ from our understanding of permissible evidence, really. And so, yeah, how does Herodotus's approach to historiography compare with our own modern approach? Yeah, it compares quite well, is in that he is sort of doing what we have always done, which is go and verify information that you've heard or found from different sources and weigh them up. But however, what's changed is what we sort of consider like evidence, and scientifically. So what do we consider evidence? For Herodotus, he was drawing from a much broader idea of what can be considered evidence, including myth, his legend, and religion. Whereas us, we're much more constrained by, as modern scholars, archaeology and sort of surviving sources, but still we contrast and compare these to come to a conclusion about what we are looking at. So thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope that has helped, and I'll see you next time.